Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 45 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet me at OBKiev or tweet us at the Odds Breakers. My friends, we have another fantastic show for college football week 2 and NFL week 1. It is finally here. We, of course, talk about sharp movement when it comes to the sides and the totals in the NCAA as well as the NFL. We are going to give out my picks, some free picks in college as well as the NFL for the upcoming weekend. College picks for free were 2-1 last week. Funny enough, some of the premium didn't come through. But not only that, we have a special guest, Mr. Ralph Michaels from wagertalk.com. And I do not know anybody that compiles stats better than Ralph Michaels. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag. For a 100% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie and use the promo code TheOddsBreakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out and sponsor us, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, become a member for $17.99 a month. You'll get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you can have all that and become a patron subscriber and get the podcast a little bit earlier. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a Free Picks newsletter subscriber. College football is underway, and it hit, well, like a load of bricks, didn't it, last week? Lots going on. Lots of research has happened. I hope you listened to the earlier podcast this week where we talked about some betting spots, where it becomes to look aheads, get up spots, and let down spots, as well as some scores that were a little bit misleading. But let's get into what's important, and that's talking pigskin with one of the best out there, Mr. Ralph Michaels. Now I'm very excited to bring on a well-known and top-of-the-line handicapper with top-of-the-line statistics. You can find his great information and plays at wagertalk.com. I'd like to welcome Ralph Michaels to the Odds Breakers podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Ralph, it was great hanging out with you guys a little bit on Friday, watching some games. How you doing today?
Doing great. Pleasure to be on. Yeah, we did have fun. I think you enjoyed it more than most of us watching your Wisconsin Badgers maul the Bulls. And that is one thing they certainly did. They sure looked good doing it. Yeah,
man, that was awesome. It sure gives you a good start. If they would have lost, I probably would have been definitely bummed out about it. But it was kind of one of those things that I know the team pretty well, and South Florida couldn't stop them. But I'll tell you right now, I'm still not sold that they're the team of the West yet, the Big Ten. I'm not going to overreact to this. South Florida missed some easy passes. They couldn't stop the run, but long way to go here. JT over there, Jonathan Taylor, has to prove me he can keep the ball in his hands and not put it on the ground. One game is not going to tell me that, and I have to make sure that Jack Cohn can still throw that ball the way he did. So, we'll be happy about this, but we'll still watch with our fingers crossed and hope for the best, my man.
Well, I'll tell you what, as a Badger fan, you couldn't have been more exciting. You watched Purdue lose to Nevada. You watched Northwestern lose, and their quarterback got hurt. You watch Nebraska struggle on offense. Minnesota almost gets beat by an FCS team. So, for those people watching the Big Ten West and those that have Wisconsin futures, I would sure think that right now it's rose-colored glasses after week one.
Yeah. From the West perspective, it is, and I do have the Wisconsin future as well as the Minnesota one. I figured it'd be okay to take both since I was getting 4-1. Minnesota they scared me a little bit, but at least they still have some health on that team. But Purdue looked bad. Nebraska did not look good at all against that FCS team, and I think Iowa's the one that's possibly still in the way, but Northwestern didn't. They look terrible, and Green got hurt. They still got that freshman that's pretty good. Obviously, they were supposed to be pretty good. He wasn't good last game.
Yeah, he struggled. He struggled in that game for sure. Hunter Johnson absolutely did struggle.
Yeah, so things are looking up, man. Cross my fingers. Let's see how far this team can go. We'll go as far as Paul Chris and Jack Cohn, I think, can take us. But we'll see. We might be a dark horse against some of those bigger teams like Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State. We might be we might be the sharp side I'm hoping for. So we'll see what happens there, my man. Let's get right into this week's slate of games. What are some of the things we learned, I suppose, from week one? And we can kind of it's a general question, maybe talk about some of the conference. We know that bad beats still exist. What are some of the things that you learned, Ralphie?
Well, the Mountain West went 8-2 against the spread, and they were obviously the team that got a lot of buzz with upsets and with Boise and Nevada and Wyoming. It made you catch your eye. We've seen some SEC teams sure play poorly, with Tennessee losing and Ole Miss dropping their game to Memphis and South Carolina losing to North Carolina and Missouri. But one of the things that caught my eye is, the freshman quarterbacks, what they did. Trevor Lawrence set a new precedence a few years ago, and True Frosh, I used to automatically play against them, and I did play against a couple of them this week, but there were 4 True Frosh that played this week. Boise's Hank Brockemeyer, Auburn's Bo Nix, North Carolina's Sam Howell, and Arizona State's Jaden Daniels. Well, they went 4-0 against the spread, and they went 3-1 ATS with, if you had a loss on Arizona State, they gave up that late touchdown to Kent State. But, the times have changed where, in basketball, we see these young recruits that have AAU games early on in their careers, and they're very ready to play as freshmen, even ready to go to the NBA. Well, the same thing's happening in football now. From CYO, and when these kids are playing at a young age, they're learning how to diet properly. They're learning how to work out properly. They're getting mechanical skills. They're learning playbooks, and we're just going to have many more quarterbacks, I think, moving forward year in and year out. That as a True Frosh, it's not an automatic play against. And in fact, we saw this past week, it was a deterrent to play against them because you were playing with inflated lines. We saw that South Carolina, North Carolina line jump. The Florida State game didn't jump because of the hurricane situation. But, in the Auburn, Oregon, there was late money on Oregon as well with people playing against those trues.
Mm-hmm. Very true. It's like Trevor Lawrence set some a new precedent, and everyone seemed to follow suit, man. You wonder if it has changed for the good or for the future, or is this just an outlier that four of them week one of college football here happen to all cover their spreads and look pretty good. But maybe these high schools are teaching these kids better. Maybe they're just kind of getting into the program a little bit earlier and looking in the playbook. I can't explain it, but the kids certainly look pretty big coming out of high school these days. I feel it's not 10, 20 years ago, is it?
No, they're going to college camps. They're going to camps on college campuses starting as a freshman in high school. So the exposure they're getting, the competition they're open to, and just them knowing that the knowledge they have to try to take in at a younger age is certainly helping them. And this certainly isn't a one-year anomaly. From here on out, we will see freshmen starting, and it could change the way people recruit because there's top-tier freshmen as a quarterback, are very happy to go to a school and sit for a year. They don't want to sit multiple years, but perhaps now we're going to see some mid-majors or those mid-level teams get some quarterbacks where they can play immediately instead of them going to an elite program and sitting out a year.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely something I'm going to keep my eye on and see if this trend continues. I'll be a little bit more careful next year, week 1 probably, and I'm sure a lot of people will do the same, follow suit, and just kind of wait a little bit sometimes. But yeah, automatic fade. You're not the only one. There's a lot of people that do that. Well, are there any teams that surprised you this week? I know we do all this research throughout the spring and the summer, and every single year there's somebody out there. I almost think that this year there was a few more surprises. What are your thoughts on some of these surprising teams?
Well, my biggest power rating move, and week 1, I traditionally don't make huge moves, but it was clearly watching Georgia State and Tennessee mid third quarter. I turned on the game at halftime, and during the third quarter, I tweeted out that it really looks like Georgia State's the better team on the field. I mean, yardage-wise, getting first downs. I think they were 8 of 9 in first downs. They were a team that I just thought was the better team. They were the team I upgraded the most, moving them 4 in my power ratings. Tennessee was the one that I moved down the most. I moved them 5. Going back to week 0, I moved Arizona down 3 with their loss at Hawaii. Now, it's rare. Only once in 60 games is a team plus 4 turnovers or more, like they were in the Hawaii game, and lose the game. So they were the first team in 61 games to be plus 4 turnovers and lose. Western Kentucky, I have down 3 points. UAB, I have down 3 points. They struggled against an FCS foe. USC, I have down 3, partially because of the way they played against Fresno, and partially because of JT Daniels being down. USC, a situation where, of course, Sears, who battled for the job, transferred out last week, where USC would have had a quarterback ready to step in and take place. Now they're to the person who was number 3 in the fall camp and a young quarterback. So a difficult situation for the Trojans.
Very difficult. He's out for the season after the first game, and this is not going to go well for their coach either. He's been under the gun for a long time there. And losing that, that's going to be hard for USC to come back there, and probably good for some of those other tickets out there on Utah. In this case, they have one less of a roadblock to go to the Pac-12 championship, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Utah was a team that many picked to win the Pac-12, not because they were the strongest team in the Pac-12, but just because of their schedule. They were a team. In the Pac-12, obviously, you have 9 conference games. They were a team that only played 4 road teams with 5 at home. They were a team that didn't play Oregon or Stanford in the crossover games. And they're going to be a team that benefits as well, because why? They play USC September 20th, and while they do have to go on the road, they're going to be playing a very inexperienced quarterback playing a conference game for the first time. So everything seems to be lining up for Kyle Whittingham and the Utah Utes.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely the favorite right now. I suppose if you'd asked me, there's a few things that were surprising to me. I thought San Diego State should have scored more than 6 points against Weber State. And you're right, the Mountain West did very well except for that. They were kind of my pick to win the West. Now I'm a little concerned looking at the Hawaii side. Hawaii was kind of my second. I did take them over their season win total. I think you liked Hawaii there a little bit too. That was something that concerned me a little bit. Colorado State outgained Colorado, yet they lost by 21 points. And that was really interesting to me. Some of the turnovers killed that game, but it's kind of making me really curious about this Colorado and Nebraska line that's going to be coming out here. Middle Tennessee State able to throw the ball against Michigan. Now they covered the spread there, but I expected Michigan to kind of start a lot faster than they did. And maybe they weren't trying to show some of their plays and show their hand. But I thought Middle Tennessee State, after replacing Stocksdale and all those other guys, was not going to do nearly as well. And Northern Iowa scaring Iowa State all the way to overtime, man. That kind of blew my mind too, because Iowa State was a sleeper pick for a lot of people.
It was, jumping back on, a couple notes on your assessments. The Colorado State game, you are correct. It's a game where Colorado was plus 4 turnovers. Well, a lot of times the team that is negative turnovers is going to have a yardage edge. Why? Well, because you get defensive touchdowns, you get special teams touchdowns, or you get very short touchdowns where Colorado can't gain yards, and then Colorado State having to play from behind always is passing the ball, throwing the ball, and trying to gain yards. So often when you have a 4 turnover edge, you do have a discrepancy in the negative way in the yardage because of that. And as far as Michigan goes, Michigan may have not had the entire playbook on the plate, but I'll tell you what, they did try to unveil their no huddle, and they were plagued by mental and physical errors. Harbaugh, in fact, says, I have a quote here, we shot ourselves in the foot with pre-snap penalties and mishandling the ball. So there was a team that was trying to take their offense to a next level with an experienced quarterback in Shea Patterson and just struggled doing it. So, Michigan continues just to be that head scratcher when you have some of the best talent in the country, and games like Middle Tennessee State, who, lost a 4-year starting quarterback in Stockstill, the head coach's son, with a brand new quarterback. Middle Tennessee put up the yards they did. That was certainly one of my surprises as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point about Colorado there. The turnover discrepancy was so big that they were probably in prevent. And I did not watch this whole game, only bits and pieces, but they were probably in prevent defense towards the end, which I didn't watch, and which obviously allowed Colorado State to move the ball while Colorado State is trying to stop the run. Colorado just wants to run the ball, run the clock out when they're up. So that makes total sense to me. You're right. Maybe Michigan was treating it like a preseason game, but you would have thought that they could have done it better against Middle Tennessee State. That's some great points. Well, what week has your biggest power rating adjustments then? Mine personally is after week 2. I probably put the biggest differences in. I try not to overreact in week 1. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I sort of go week 1 and week 2 and go down a little bit more. Now, there's a difference. If it's a game, I try to record as many games as I can and then go back and watch them. If it's a game I watch, I am not afraid to move a team 4 points off my power rating. If it's an FCS game and they play it close to the vest, there's a lot of teams that look past those. I rarely move them past more than 2 points. So, 2 is basically my limit early, week 1s and 2s, unless it's an eye test game where I watched the game, heard the announcements, heard that if there were any injuries, and at that point, if I feel a team that I was that far off or that far wrong on a team, I'm not afraid to change them, because I go out on a limb. When I'm making my power ratings, I don't worry about what other has. A lot of times people make power ratings and they try to take a consensus of who other people have, and they don't want to be too far off. I don't care how far off I am. When I make my power ratings, from my history and my upbringing, for those that don't know, I was the general manager at Phil Steele Publications and North Coast Sports for 15 years. I had a Heisman vote for 6 years. I voted for every major committee for all the college football games. So I study college football a lot. And when I'm doing my preseason rankings, I stick with those numbers, again, no matter how far I'm off from everyone else. After week 1 in the eye test, if I am that far off, I'm not afraid to change them, that maybe I just went a little too strong or downgraded a team just a little too far.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good points there. People have to realize when they're looking at some of these public power ratings out there that some of them are just based on stats. You know, I've seen ones that don't adjust for a quarterback being out necessarily, or a major running back, or a bunch of offensive linemen, something that really affects the line. So I agree with you 100%. You should never go too much by the other ones, and don't be afraid to make a movement, because if you look at them, there is a lot of discrepancies right now. If you look at the team rankings, ESPN's Sager, and all those out there, you'll see some discrepancies, just like how Vegas is wrong about the lines. And so that's where you have to make your calls. All right, well, let's get right into a couple games, shall we?
Absolutely.
You know, it's already ramping up here. The lines are out. We have Marshall versus Boise State, and Boise State went into Florida State in the second half and just put a whooping on them. And their quarterback got some confidence there, it looks like. Marshall is a dog at Boise State by about 10.5 points here. Do you have any thoughts on this game?
Well, I would normally look to play against Boise in this situation. Number one, you're off one of your biggest wins that you've had. Number two, this has not been a good place to be a home favorite. You know, people remember how strong the blue is. Well, it's a situation where Boise's only 7-18 against the spread as a home favorite the last 4 years. A lot of times they're going against inflated lines. So the situation clearly favors Marshall. But Boise's one of those teams that I upgraded quite a bit. And a lot of that had to do with a true freshman quarterback. When you can run 108 plays and put up 621 yards with a true frosh in Tallahassee, this is a game that I will not play. I will certainly not bet against Boise, although I think the situation says to, because they really may be a team that I was just that far off on, and they may be that good. So situationally, certainly favor Marshall, but I think Boise really is that next level. You know, we talked about the Mountain West, and I did pick Hawaii to win that division. And I took a long shot flyer in Boise's division. I took Air Force. Boise might be proving me wrong. We'll wait to see until that Marshall game which way it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to tell, and that's the reason I asked you about this game. Because of what they did to Florida State. Now, I can't even gauge Florida State properly right now. I'm having a struggle doing it because of how bad they were last year and how they were kind of bet up a little bit at the end there. And then, you know, you read about them, you hear that they're motivated this year, all these great things, and then they kind of collapse in the second half. Is this the more the same of what we saw recently, or can they get back to what they were? And that's what I was trying to use to gauge this, but I think you're absolutely right. I can't gauge this at all. What I do know is Marshall's always been a pretty good team. They whipped a FCS school over there. So stay away from me unless this thing gets crazy and goes past 14, then I might have to take another look personally.
Yeah, Marshall's a team that has done well on the road, but there's just times where, you know, it's early in the year, you're watching a team, you can't gauge a team. There's plenty other games to bet where there are value. So what you do is you just learn from that experience. Yes, I had the wrong side last week. Yes, I probably had Boise too low. Yes, I probably had Florida State too high. But again, we'll wait to see what happens this week. Make it a learning experience and use it to your advantage moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, let's move into our next game. San Diego State going to UCLA, and UCLA had struggles against a Cincinnati team that looked pretty poised at home. UCLA seemed like the sharper side. They failed to cover. They lost by 10 points, and then now they're playing a San Diego State team that I'm questioning a little bit. Do you have any thoughts or any angles in this game?
Well, you know, you look at UCLA, and I was completely baffled. Not that they lost to Cincinnati, not that they failed to cover against Cincinnati, but boy, all we heard about was Chip Kelly talking about DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and how he's turned it around. Well, DTR was 8 of 26 for 156 yards. threw 2 interceptions, fumbled the ball twice. Cincinnati had a 417 to 218 yard edge. So even though that was a 10-point game, 24-14, that game was not even anywhere that close. You know, Chip Kelly went 46-7 straight up at Oregon. He is now 3-10 at UCLA. So often we give the coach a lot of credit and thinks he can turn things around, and UCLA was a team with 19 returning starters, the most in college football. But, you know, teams that returned a lot of starters this year had a negative ATS record. Teams that returned 9 or fewer starters went 9-4 against the spread. I expect UCLA to bounce back in this game. It's another name I'm not going to bet. When you put up 12 first downs, when you're a Power 5 program with 19 returning starters and you put up 12 first downs against a group of 5 team, I just can't play on you, no matter how much I think you're going to recover. You know, you talked about that San Diego State game. In the last 3 years, there's only been one other game that has had 7 or less total points besides that San Diego State game. So a 6-0 game is something we're not accustomed to. And a 6-0 game, was it because they had a lot of turnovers? No. They played a Weber State team that isn't very good. They had 14 first downs, 16 of 30 for 108 yards passing. You know, I guess I'm going to just, in my mind, logically, I think this game would translate to an underplay. There's so many people that think UCLA is just going to automatically bounce back and be better this next week. Well, I'm not so sure. Rocky Long's 3-3-5 defense is a defense that quarterbacks never see until they play San Diego State for the first time. So in this situation, I'm going to lean with the under in this game.
And the over-under kind of sitting in that NFL range of 45.5 right there. So that almost looks like the right side, just from the way it lays out there. Really interested to see where this line goes and if I decide to make a play on it as well. Yeah, UCLA, how can you bet on them after what they did? What is Chip Kelly now? You know, he's not at Oregon anymore. Obviously, he had that decent NFL with the Eagles, but then kind of everything crumbled under him. You know, started there's been some backstabbing there, and then he comes back after being a year or two off coaching, and I expected more out of him this year too. So 100% agree with you there. How can you play on this team? Well, let's move right into a triple option team that was extremely good last year, but when you saw them against Rice, Rice, baby, I tell you, they did not do good. As a matter of fact, Rice covered that spread pretty easily, and now they're going to play a Michigan team with Michigan laying 23 points. Do you have any initial thoughts in this game?
Well, a couple notes on the Rice-Army game. Number one, I mean, Rice was one of the worst teams in the FBS last year, getting outgained by 138 yards per game and finishing 2-11 in Mike Bloomgreen's first season. But you have to remember, they only returned 11 starters to a very bad team, and yes, they struggled. Rice this year has 7 grad transfers coming in and starting for them. So that means you're returning 12 starters plus 7 new players that all have experience playing for bigger schools. Also, when you're playing the option week 1, it's a huge advantage. You work on that option all of August. Probably almost every practice session was working on the option and learning how to defend it. The option, on the flip side, usually takes a few games to get going. They have to get their timing down. You have to get the timing down between the quarterback pitch and the running back, the timing down between the running back and the offensive line. So Rice covering doesn't surprise me. The yardage does surprise me a little bit that Army only had 17 first downs and 284 yards. With that said, again, I expect much improvement out of Michigan after what they did with Middle Tennessee State. Mm-hmm. And, the question comes down to this. It seems like an under game to me. And that's pretty obvious to say when you have a Michigan offense that didn't really move the ball and you're playing an option. But the question is, can Army score 14 points? And the Army team I saw last week cannot score 14 points against the Michigan D, despite Middle Tennessee State doing it. And that's where I basically handicap a game. I play a game through in my head, and I look. And you look at where the side and total is and what the numbers would be if it's a push on the side and a push on the total. And do you think your one team can get there? And do you think your other team can get there? And if I could answer, can Army score 14 points? I'd have a play probably on the side or the total. But because I can't, because of the situations and the newness, it's another game that I won't be on. And I'm going to pass, even though I lean with the dog and the under.
Yeah, that's a pass too for me. Michigan, you wonder if they're going to try to work on that 2-minute offense again, or try to get more kinks out against an Army team, or do they kind of buckle down a little bit, make sure they get this win going into the bye week before they face a very tough Badger team. So going to be interested in watching this game for sure to kind of see what it looks like, just so I can kind of have a gauge on Michigan for the future. Let's look at Texas A&M versus Clemson here. You know, a lot of people kind of faded these teams due to a possible look-ahead spot, but then again, look-aheads are not, you can't really judge them as much in the first game of the year. But, you know, Texas A&M, Clemson got the cover against an easy Georgia Tech team. The spread's looking at Clemson at 17 in the hook. This is going to be a huge game. Last year, I believe Kelly Bryant started for Clemson, and they kind of got by, not by a lot, won by 2 or 3 points, if I can remember properly. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was. In fact, it was A&M scoring last and being down by 2, and a missed 2-point conversion kept them from tying that game.
That's right.
I look at Clemson, and you look at the defense, and people say, well, their defense is just as good as last year. I call BS on that. They held Georgia Tech to 294 yards, but this is a Georgia Tech team that was returning only 8 starters and was playing their first game from switching from the option to a traditional pass offense. That's the hardest thing they're doing in football, is to change that offense over in 1 year. So I think Clemson is getting too much love with their game one. I do like A&M in this spot. I think they can certainly cover. I think their offense is dynamic. Jimbo Fisher has only been a dog a handful of times when a double-digit dog, only 4 times. He's 3-0-1 ATS in that role. He's got an experienced squad that knows they can hang. They hung with a better Clemson team last week. I do like A&M plus the points this week.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that A&M, just how they know this team and know how close they were, is going to come in to Clemson with a vengeance, put the earmuffs on, not worry about the crowd noise. And Kellen Mond, I think, might know what to do here, especially when Clemson lost a lot of talent there on their defensive line, and kind of really all over the board. They do have their, obviously, ETN and some of their skill positions at their wide receivers, but Texas A&M should be able to put up some points here. What this total tells me is that both teams are going to put up points at 64. I think that you might be on the right side there. Texas A&M plus 17.5. Do you think that this spread goes towards the 20? Or do you think it comes back to 17?
I would think it's going to go up. I think right now there's until Clemson or Alabama loses and fails to cover, I think you have situations where people believe they are just so far superior than everyone else, then they want to bet on them. Once one of those teams loses, I think we might start coming back. But I can't imagine either of those teams not getting public money at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking at the Texas A&M side, but you're not quite sure, you can always wait this one out a little bit. And if it doesn't go far in the direction, just put a smaller play on it. So definitely with you on there. Clemson's a super public team nowadays, and waiting on this one is the right choice. Let's move into a very interesting game here. And the reason I wanted you to talk about this one is because, well, first of all, Tulane, I was kind of high on them, and they looked pretty good against the FIU team that scored a lot of points last year. As a matter of fact, I complained to you about the fact that they couldn't go over 57 in a quarter in 4.5 minutes there. And it is because Tulane's defense really locked down on them. And I know these are group of 5 teams, but Tulane's going to play an Auburn team that just got done with Oregon there. I wonder what their thoughts are. Auburn's laying 18 points.
Well, my power ratings have the game at 24. And normally, if I have a 6-point difference, it means I would play Auburn. But I cannot play Auburn off that emotional win. You look at what the Auburn defense did. Oregon was blazing coming out of the opening kickoff, and Oregon had 146 yards and 9 first downs in the first quarter. But then Auburn completely shut them down, and the Ducks had 176 and 8 first downs the last 3 quarters. I am very excited what Willie Fritz has going in his 4th year, and putting up 545 yards, and more importantly to me is the 28 first downs. That shows they really can move that ball. Justin McMillan was 14 of 18. You can't have a better day than that. And then you have your multiple running backs. You had 4 running backs that had 44 yards or more in Darius Bradwell and Dauphine and Henderson and Carroll, and that's going to give you a lot of options to go moving forward. I think they can even give Houston a run in a couple weeks. Now, again, this Auburn defense, even though there's going to be a bit of a letdown for Auburn, it's still a situation where man-to-man, they are just dominant over this Tulane team. And it's a situation where I don't bet on things that I can't monetize. And since you can't monetize how much of a letdown Auburn's going to have, it's a game where I have Auburn favored. The situation certainly favors Tulane, so I will sit out and watch.
Yeah, Bo Nix, like you mentioned before, he did the job. He had 2 picks, but he still had the 2 TD passes. They had 206 yards on the ground. And, Tulane might be able to stop FIU on the ground, but when Auburn wants to turn it on, they can. So hard to gauge that as well. So I looked at the 18 points, and I looked at where it was playing, and I was kind of like scratching my head. I'm like, only 18 points for an Auburn team? I was like what's Ralph think about this?
Auburn, you got to remember, Auburn is only 6-17-1 against the spread at home their last 24 games. So you've covered 25% of your games at home. That's it. But, if Auburn, the letdown situation and why I can't bet it is because this is Tulane, and obviously it's their home opener, but they only have Kent State on deck. If they had another SEC foe, this would be a clear sandwich spot that I would be on. But the line got adjusted like it's a sandwich spot, like Auburn has someone huge on deck. But with only Kent State on deck, it lightens up any pressure they have on them at all.
Yeah, 100% agree. Probably another stay-away game. But I don't know if a lot of the public's going to be staying away from this next one that I want to bring up. And this is kind of the big one that I've been looking forward to all summer long. You have an LSU team that just blows out Georgia Southern, scoring 55 points. You have a Texas team that covered their spread again. Two more teams that people thought would be stuck in an early look ahead, not, and they cover their games. Now you have Texas, a dog at +5 points. I believe it was +3 a while back. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, the line clearly moved because Texas's running back got hurt. He's out. Mm-hmm. They had 2 more running backs hurt in camp. So the second string running back was a person who was playing quarterback last week, and the third string running back is someone who was playing wide receiver. So that line clearly jumped. People heard that news and said, well, I've got to bet LSU because of those injuries. I like LSU. LSU is one of my favorite teams. And I'll tell you this, a little advice for anyone listening. If you believe in LSU or you believe in Texas, either one, and you think you want to bet them to win the national championship, make sure you do it before this game, because this profile game, being on TV and being with everyone watching, the winner is going to have their futures drop significantly. Mm-hmm. So no matter what side you're on, either side, it's a big game as far as futures are concerned, because you do want to bet it before. I'm a fan of LSU. I think LSU handles this game, but rarely, if ever, do I not make a play because of one simple team trend or coach trend. But in this case, I will not play against Texas as a home dog, because Tom Herman is 8-2 as a home dog in Texas. Mm-hmm. He's 13-2 as a home dog in Houston and Texas, and he's 23-2 going back as an OC with Ohio State and Iowa State as a home dog. Him as a home dog is enough to keep me off this game. With that being said, LSU is going to a very up-tempo offense. 4 or 5 receivers will be lining up on most plays. With Texas's running back injuries, Ellinger, the pressure will be on Ellinger to win it. I think this total is pretty cheap at 55 at double nickels, and I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up as one of my top plays at the end of the week. I do like LSU and Texas over the total.
Wow, the 55 is just sitting there. Looks like, yep, those running back injuries could affect it. Could be a lot of throwing at the end of the game. So LSU really picked up their pace. Why is that?
Well, they have a new OC. You have an experienced quarterback. You have some of the most talented wide receivers. And, there really hasn't been, maybe Michigan, there really hasn't been a worse offense the last few years. You look at the talent that comes out of LSU every year, and for them to average only 35 points and 400 yards, 32 points and 400 yards last year, and 27 points and 411 yards the last couple years. They just decided, boom, Ed Orgeron gave up the play calling duties. He said he's going to leave it up to the new OC. Emsinger's there, and he's doing what he wants to do. He only ran 71 plays this past week, but that was because it was Georgia Southern, and they ran the ball 33 times. This will be a different scenario. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU approaches 90 plays on the road, and you're going to see a lot of passing. They trust Joe Burrow, the Ohio State transfer. He was there last year. He had a 5-0 ratio game one, was 23 of 27. That's pretty experienced against an FBS team. This isn't like, Georgia Southern was a 10-win or a 9-win FBS team, and you're completing 23 of 27. That means you got the offense down pretty handily. So I am buying into the LSU hype. I am buying in that their offense is going to be able to move the ball. And again, while I clearly have them as the much better team, Tom Herman game plan in this situation keeps me from using both side and total. I'll just be using the over.
Well, and you saw how Texas can handle some of those faster teams like Oklahoma. Those totals went pretty high last year. They can kind of play with them even if they do get beat there. So loving that play. 100%. It's very strange, I got to tell you, to see LSU putting up all these points the last year and a half here. So, Joe Burrow's been great, and things are really looking up for the Tigers there. It's going to be really interesting if they keep this, if they win this game and keep this route going through their season when they face Ole Alabama again. I really can't wait to see that game. Well, real quickly, Ralph, we're out of time, but is there any games that you want to discuss before we go?
I'll leave it with a best bet on Illinois. Illinois handled Akron easily. Connecticut is a team that, listen, they're going to be on their way out. The basketball team moving to the Big East, they're not going to be able to survive as an FBS football independent. Illinois is a team that I have up quite a few arrows. They proved they can get some margin last week. Connecticut is a team that I have down at one of the lowest. I think Illinois goes to 2-0 and gets another big win.
All right there. Well, thank you so much for that. Hopefully you listeners get that nice and early. Looks like that Illinois side is going to be pretty sweet against one of the worst defenses. Actually, the worst defense UConn had in all of college football history last year. That last game, they gave up enough yards to become the worst college football defense. So I agree with you. Looks like it's going to be moving down time for UConn. Well, how can our listeners benefit from your great plays and information, Ralph?
Well, again, I don't use Twitter except to try to teach people how to handicap better. At CalSportsLV, if anyone's interested in my plays, go to wagertalk.com. I do a daily baseball newsletter called First Pitch. That's free. If they go to wagertalk.com, they can just go to the Ralph Michaels page. I'll be starting a college football newsletter this upcoming week on Monday. It'll be a full page per matchup with box scores line by line. It'll have ATS and over-under records. And I have plenty of information. I tweet out weekly schedules. If you're an old-timer like me and you want to print out a schedule on one page for college football, I've got them up there for college and NFL. A ton of free information. Wagertalk.com. Go to the Ralph Michaels page.
All right. You heard that right there from Ralph Michaels. Some great information he gave you all right there. You make sure you follow him on Twitter. It's a great learning experience at CalSportsLV. Ralph, thanks again for coming on. Had a blast with you last weekend, and you have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, appreciate it, buddy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Let's get into our college football picks for week 2. And remember that we gave out many picks on, when the lines come out on Monday and Tuesday, but we gave out a free pick in Alabama playing New Mexico State. We actually gave out New Mexico State, but we have 3 more for you. Subscribe to our new YouTube channel. You may see another free college pick coming up for this weekend, coming up there as well. Probably already at 8 or 9 picks for the premium and the shared plays. Looks like we have BYU going to Tennessee. The over-under is 51.5. This is a 2-star play. So there's something about when I look at teams and they turn over the ball. Both teams, Tennessee and BYU, lost last week. Scores were a little bit misleading, and they had many turnovers. Tennessee had 3 of them. BYU had 3 of them as well. Tennessee gave up 213 yards on the ground last week, and BYU gave up 262. Well, these coaches are 0-1 to start the season, and I think when they look at what Tennessee gives up and Tennessee looks at what BYU gives up, they're going to see an advantage in the run game here, okay? There is a good trend, actually a couple good trends when it comes to BYU, and I've been noticing this for years, and I looked it up and I was right. BYU, when they're on the road, their under is 35-16. Now, that's huge, okay? That's like over 67-68%, the under. And that's since November 14th of 2009. When they are a road dog, since September 19th, 2015, they are 11-2, the under to the over. 11 unders to 2 overs. That is a fantastic system for BYU when they happen to be on the road and they are a dog, especially like in this situation. You look towards the under. Last year, BYU only averaged 67 plays per game under Jeff Grimes. Okay, now new offensive coordinator Jim Chaney for Tennessee does have a pass-heavy offense, but he also doesn't press the pace. We saw that last year at Georgia when he was coordinator. We saw that at Arkansas when he was coordinator. Jeff Grimes, as you see for BYU, they keep the pace pretty slow themselves. Okay, so looking at these two teams, they're going to be careful. They're going to run the ball. I love the under here, under 51.5, and it's a 2-star play. For their next play, we're going to look to a conference that I specialize in. And remember, I always recommend that you specialize in a conference and learn as much as you can about it so you can prevail at least at one conference while there's so many other teams out there. I am looking at Illinois getting 20 or giving 20 points versus UConn at UConn. All right. So there's a reason that Illinois is given so many of these points. I don't even remember the last time that Illinois was giving so many points on the road. It had to be sometime back in the 80s or 90s. But one thing I will say is that there's a reason for it. UConn is terrible. And I mean terrible.
You suck!
But, how can they be getting so many points at home? Well, I'll tell you why. Last year, UConn was outscored in every game in a Group of 5 conference, 50-22. Okay, they allowed a record 8.8 yards per play. Absolutely ridiculous. They broke the record of giving up the most yards in college football history last year. And Illinois is a much improved team, as you saw, versus Akron. Not saying Akron's a powerhouse by any means, but Illinois did dispose of them by 40-some points. They were really young last year, and there's a reason Lovey was like there. He got an extension. I'm starting to believe that maybe he's getting a system to work. Illinois, they like to play a faster pace game when they're up against the smaller teams. I think this shouldn't be hard to cover in Connecticut. UConn's a basketball school. They barely beat a bad FCS team in Wagner last week. So there's a reason for this high spread. I'm buying into it. I'm taking Illinois minus 20. This is a 2-star play. Ralph Michaels agrees.
You better lock it up. You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up. Lock it up.
And for our final college play that we are giving out on this podcast, I am looking at a team that everybody seemed to be on except for me. Looking to go against this team, and that is the Michigan State Spartans. They are playing Western Michigan, getting 16 points. Now, when I gave this out to premium members on Monday, it was at 17.5, but I still like it. Down to 14. I'm actually kind of high on Western Michigan this year. Their quarterback, John Wesink, and I probably just destroyed his last name, was great last year until he got hurt versus Toledo. Western Michigan ranks number 1 in returning production out of all of college football. Michigan State, on the other hand, they returned some production, but I don't like exactly what they returned on offense. They do have a great defensive line, but their offense really doesn't put up a lot of points, and they're sitting there laying over 2 touchdowns to a pretty good Group of 5 team. Michigan State only averaged 4.6 yards per play under Lewerke last year, their quarterback, and they did not have a good showing against a very bad Tulsa team last week. Couldn't cover the spread. Tulsa's power ranked pretty low down there into the 110s. So another thing I like here is that Michigan State is 1-7 against the spread at home since 2018 for the whole season. And Michigan State is also, ding, 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 in a look-ahead spot to getting revenge from the Arizona State Sun Devils game last year where they lost in the heat. Okay. To this game, Michigan State is looking to advance to their next big look-ahead spot, and Western Michigan, the Broncos, are looking at this like a bowl game for them. They can put up points. I like them to cover this spread, and this could be too close for comfort from Michigan State. At plus 16, I like it for 1 star. We took it for more when the lines came out Monday and Tuesday. All right, and on to the NFL. So I'd like to start by saying that, might as well give this out now. We had the Ravens earlier, took it in early August at minus 4.5 as a premium play. It is at about minus 7 now. And I'm not so sure there's any value left at that number. But if you can get like a 6 or take a look for a 6, I'm expecting some buyback from a lot of sharp action that happened early. You might get lucky there to take it at 6, but that 6.5 is kind of where I would stop this play. I have it at about a 7. I had it before at 7.5, but now I have it at 7. So that Ravens thing's long gone, obviously. But it was a very popular play in early August when the NFL lines came out. All right, so why don't we start out here with the New York Giants versus the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas was laying about 7 points. So this Dallas team has been a team with a lot of distractions this year, as we all know. They finally made a deal with Zeke, multimillionaire. They made him richer than any running back in the history of the NFL. $100-some million contract, about half of it's guaranteed, playing till 2000, who knows, probably like 5 or 6 years. And I wonder if the rest of the team is wondering if they're going to get any money now that you got guys like Zeke taking it up. Mari Cooper's going to be due. Dak Prescott's going to be due. You know, Dak's not exactly a happy camper there, requesting $40 million and not getting it. So I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some, well, let's just say, could be locker room issues and some jealousy issues within this Cowboys organization here. They did lock up some linemen, which is good. But I wasn't a huge believer in Dallas last year. I thought, some things bounced their way many times. And I think it was kind of the opposite with the Giants. We nailed that under 7.5 season win total with the Giants. They hit 5. But to be honest with you, they could have won a little bit more. I think the Giants have really improved from last year to this year. Getting guys like Dexter Lawrence, I love that. Julian Love, I thought those were good picks. And signing Kevin Zeitler at guard and Antoine Bethea at safety and free agency was great moves. And backup Daniel Jones, he was a high pick, obviously. But like I said in a podcast before, it didn't really matter. You got Dexter Lawrence late and Daniel Jones early. You could have flip-flopped them. People overreacted to what happened there. And I really believe that Dave Gettleman is probably sleeping easy right now with what we saw in the preseason. Now, we shouldn't overreact to preseason, but what I do know is Daniel Jones will push Eli. He will. And Saquon Barkley, this is his second season, and he's the number 1 fantasy back. He's going to be dominant in the backfield. One huge factor to me liking the Giants +7, and to be honest with you, I like them all the way down to +4. Okay? This is at least a 2-star play. Is that the Giants were better in DVOA, which is a statistic for football outsiders. It's kind of like an overall efficiency statistic. It basically calculates the team's success based on the down and the distance that they move each play during the season because, explosiveness and efficiency really come into play when it looks like how successful these teams are moving the ball, especially when it comes to important situations. It factors out like garbage time and things like that. So DVOA is a great way of looking at things. And the Giants had a higher DVOA than Dallas last year, even though Dallas won 10 games and the Giants only won 5. Giants Pythagorean was actually 6.9. They scored a lot more points than you would think a 5-win team would. And Dallas's Pythagorean was 8.4 and not a 10. So these teams weren't that different from each other last year. And with all these distractions, I have to play the road dog here, taking the points, +7, +6.5, wherever you're at. I got the +7 at -120. I like that safety blanket personally, but this is definitely a 2-star play. Woo! All right, and last and definitely not least, we have the Thursday night game for you, my friends. Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. The Bears are laying 3 piddly points. All right. So I don't know what the hell happened here. All right. And I'm a Bear fan. You also know I don't always bet on my team, and sometimes I fade my team. But this is a little bit ridiculous, okay? I do not understand why the Chicago Bears are looked at as even with the Green Bay Packers in so many people's power ratings, and very much in the sharper eyes out there. They're fading the Bears, okay? And I've talked about this before. The Bears they were very healthy last year, which is something you like to fade. They had a very easy schedule last year. Now they have a hard schedule, which is something you like to fade. But what does that have to do with the first game of the year? I understand when it comes to a season win total, but what did the Bears do to deserve even rating the first game of the year against the Packers? Okay. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not like the Bears are injured yet. Look at what the Packers lost. They lost defensive tackle Mohammed Wilkerson. Okay. They lost linebacker Clay Matthews. They lost linebacker Nick Perry. They signed a few other guys, but not necessarily of the same caliber as Clay Matthews. They signed Smith. They lost slot receiver Randall Cobb, inside linebacker Jake Ryan. Okay. The Bears lost a few guys like Adrian Amos in safety and Bryce Callahan, but they replaced them with ex-Packer Clinton Dix and Buster Skrine for the slot to replace Callahan. Okay. Slot corner. So I just do not understand how the Bears got worse. They got a better running back in David Montgomery now. They saw that Jordan Howard really wasn't that good. Their offensive line is healthy, and this is the second year of a young team gelling. This line is off by 3 points to me. 3 points, okay? This is not just, and this is a night game at Soldier Field. This line could be off by 7 points, personally. I do not know what all the love for the Packers is here. I think this Aaron Rodgers thing is too overblown. I'm taking the Bears. This should be a 2 to 3 star play minimum, only because it's the first game of the season. This might have been like a 4 or 5 star if it was later in the season, according to my power ratings. But take the Bears. Bear down Chicago. It would not surprise me to see them win in blowout fashion. And let's not forget that last year in Game 1 in Green Bay, Sunday Night Football, they gave up that huge lead. Don't think that's not going to be on the back of their minds. All right, my friends, it is now time for
the Sharp Side of the Force.
Sharp Side of the Force is brought to you by uwager.lv. for a 100% sign-up bonus. Please visit UWager and use the promo code ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's take a look at some of the sharp movement in the NFL as well in college football. We'll start with college here. And just remember, we talk about the difference between the number of tickets as well as to the actual money. So basically, if 50% of the tickets are on one team and 71% of the money is on that same team, that means there's a 21% difference between ticket and money. I need a 21% over 20% difference usually on the side and 30% difference to the total when it comes to college. So let's start with Northern Illinois at Utah. This went from plus 23 down to plus 21.5. There's a 21% difference. Sharp money is on Northern Illinois. Sharp money on South Florida at Georgia Tech after that disgusting loss to Wisconsin at plus 6.5, a 22% difference. Sharp money on San Jose State hosting Tulsa from plus 7 to plus 6.5, a 42% difference. That's a statement right there. Baylor hosting University of Texas San Antonio at minus 25.5, a 31% difference. That is a huge spread, and the Sharps are still hitting Baylor. Now, there's dual action on the Illinois at UConn. It looks like it's starting to move up here, 20.5. 97% of the money is on Illinois. That is some dual action right there. Texas State hosting Wyoming at plus 7 is a 23% difference. LSU at Texas went from minus 3 to minus 6.5. Now, there's a lot of buyback happening. Try to middle that thing from some of the sharp players. So the money difference isn't showing anymore. But you can tell from a game of this caliber moving off minus 3 to minus 6.5, it definitely took some serious action. Coastal Carolina at Kansas plus 10.5 to plus 7.5, a 22% difference. Western Michigan at Michigan State plus 17.5 to plus 16 is a 16% difference. I mentioned this one because it went through the 17. Sharp totals. UAB versus Akron under from 49 down to 46, a 36% difference. People like the under. Sharp action on Rutgers versus Iowa under 49.5, a 35% difference. South Florida versus Georgia Tech over 62, a 40% difference. Tulsa versus San Jose State under 52.5, a 32% difference. Texas A&M versus Clemson. There's dual action on the over there. It went from 60 to 64. 94% of the money is on the over. Liberty versus Louisiana over 65.5, a 32% difference. LSU versus Texas over 56 now. Went from 54.5, 55 is a 27% difference. So the over is getting hammered as well. Tulane versus Auburn over 51.5 is a 95% of the money. Some dual action there, it looks like. Eastern Michigan versus Kentucky over 53.5 is a 34% difference. Oh, man, that's a hard one for me right there, Eastern Michigan. Minnesota versus Fresno State over 48.5, a 45% difference. And Oregon State versus Hawaii over 78. What a huge number. A 31% difference. The Sharps still love the over in that game. Sharp NFL sides. San Francisco at Tampa from 1.5 down to pick'em. I believe that Tampa was minus 1.5. And it's a 21% difference. The move from Baltimore from 3.5 to minus 7 at Miami was sharp, but now there's buyback. Jacksonville hosting Kansas City from plus 4.5 to plus 3.5 is a 22% difference. I disagree with that. I can't fade Kansas City any under 7 points against Jacksonville. Hell, that's almost a Kansas City play to me. Very nervous about it. It's very interesting how that line moved from plus 4.5 to plus 3.5. Tennessee at Cleveland, plus 5.5, a 34% difference. Some Cleveland disbelief going on right there. Pittsburgh at New England, plus 5.5, a 23% difference. So sharp money on Pittsburgh. Sharp NFL totals. San Fran versus Tampa Bay from 49 to 50.5, a 25% difference. And dual action on the Baltimore and Miami over as well, 38.5. That's a low total for the NFL, but it's Baltimore and it's Miami. Washington versus Philly, under 45, a 19% difference with some dual action there. Looks like people love the under there. And there's some sharp on LA Rams versus Carolina, over 50, a 51% difference there. Wow. Can both these teams go nuts on scoring? That's interesting that the over got hit so much so far on that Rams versus Carolina game. All right, my friends. Well, that's what we have for our show today. If you have any questions or if you'd like us to break down a game for you next week, please tweet us at The Odds Breakers or contact us at theoddsbreakers.com. We are more than happy to give you some of our opinions. Have a fantastic weekend betting and go get some wins.